The follow-up to the officer-involved shooting, kind of covered the details that I covered last night, and then add to what we've learned throughout the day today and into the night last night. As I said this morning, around 12:09, we were dispatched to a report of a shooting, and then some information that it was going to be a double shooting over in the Winton Drive area, northwest side of Jacksonville. That call came into 911. We dispatched officers. Additional information began coming in about the potential suspect vehicle, that it was a black car. So officers respond to that area and can't immediately find our victims in the case. It turns out that they had self-transported over to UF Health. Both of them had a gunshot wound. Did not wait around for fire rescue to show up, took themselves there. So as several of the officers were in that area, we had two particular officers, one of which is a field training officer. He had a recruit with him, and they had begun searching the area for the victims and came across what they believed to be the original crime scene where the first shooting happened, or where the shooting had occurred. So they were out of their car kind of looking into that. And again, I'll remind you that a description of a black car had been put out. So they're outside of their car and see a black vehicle drive by slowly. They kind of deferred it to go another way, that portion of the street was blocked off. And the car then passed by them, ignored them, and their directions to stop went by them. So they thought that to be a clue and decided to follow that car. That car began to flee from them. They activated their lights and siren, and a short neighborhood pursuit went on. During the pursuit, oddly enough, the occupants of the vehicle were throwing objects out, a car seat, trash, papers, and whatnot during the pursuit. And that was around 12:15, so just a few minutes after the original call went out. So at around 12:18, at the original location on Cavalier where the shooting occurred, the vehicle slowed, and the passenger of the car exited the vehicle from the passenger front seat. Now, reminded you that this is a field training officer in a recruit status. The field training officer was actually riding in the passenger seat of the police car, so the police car came to a stop. He exited the police car and gave chase to the suspect on foot who had exited the passenger side. They ran into the side yard of a house directly across from where the car stopped. The officer gave history, and again, with these officer-involved shootings, we don't question the officer immediately at the scene. There are legal limitations as to us being able to do that. So we get a statement through the FOP attorney, the Fraternal Order Police attorney, and one of the statements that was offered to us through the proffer was that he clearly saw the suspect with the gun in his hand as he exited the car in the driveway of the house. So he continued to give chase of that suspect into the backyard of the house. That backyard of the house is fenced in, and over the fence is a large ditch that continues through to the other side to another street in the neighborhood. It's fairly deep and fairly wide for a ditch like that. So he sees the suspect run into the backyard. He's pursuing him. The suspect jumps the fence, and whatever occurs at that point in time, it causes the officer to use his firearm. He discharged that 4 times at the suspect from 2 different locations within the backyard. Hit the suspect 1 time in his lower left leg. Other units had responded and went to the other side of the ditch. They were able to apprehend the suspect as he crawled out of the ditch and went to the other side. He was transported to UF Health, was treated there, and released. I gave the officer's name last night. That is our 6-year veteran, Matt Heiss, H-I-C-E. The recruit that he had with him was Joseph Gasson, G-A-S-S-O-N, and he's only been with the Sheriff's Office for 5 months in training. So Officer Heiss has been placed on administrative leave, which is pretty standard per our policy. The original shooting is being looked into and investigated by the Violent Crimes Task Force, and we're looking into the nature of that. And I have a little bit more information as to what occurred there. So we had 2 individuals: an 18-year-old Tristan, T-R-I-S-T-A-N, Tarver. He's an 18-year-old white male, and his friend, 20-year-old Dion Deox. So the 2 of them were going to be able to sell a medium to large quantity of marijuana, and this is at their own admissions. So they hooked up with an associate of theirs. The associate of theirs just so happens to be the same individual that had the gun in the pursuit, and the officer shot in the leg. And he is been identified as Chris Dion Coleman, and he's 19 years old, and he's a black male as well. Well, that's who these two are going to meet. So it's in that Whitten Drive area that they made contact with him and had the two cars pulled up next to each other as they're in the midst of having a conversation about the drug sales. Another vehicle pulled up behind Chris's car. That was a dark-colored car. Somebody exited the car, and they saw the nub of a gun come out and point into their car. And when they saw that nub, they fired twice into their car when they were shot. So their drug deal went bad. Their drug dealer that they hooked up with is got some history out of what we believe to be St. Johns County, and we had a bit of a glitch when it came to getting the criminal history. We strongly believe that he's a convicted felon out of St. Johns County for a robbery, sudden snatching. Couldn't find the exact information out, but he has registered here as a convicted felon in Jacksonville and Duval County as per his requirements. So couldn't find the exact charge that he was, but he's registered here for a sudden snatching out of another county, and that's what we believe to be it. So that plans that those two young men had to sell their marijuana went south, and it caused the chain of events that occurred. The officers that work the streets of the city here, they never know what they're going to find themselves involved in. Traffic stops, domestic calls, and frankly, people like this who find themselves, for whatever reason, involved in drug trade, trying to make whatever meager living they want to make by selling marijuana. They sell it to people who are armed with guns, who don't mind using those guns. They sometimes arm themselves, and we have incidents like this occur where two individuals are shot, and then our officer, paid by our tax money to enforce the law, ends up having to chase one of these people who decides to not follow his instructions, to not stop when he tells him to not get out of a car with a gun in his hand, and to not do whatever he did. And again, as things progress, we'll know a little bit more about that. The suspect, Coleman, at this point in time, is only charged with resisting without violence. But again, with our limited conversations that we've had so far with Officer Heiss, I don't know enough to say what he did with that gun, if that was the commission of another crime, did he point it at him, what exactly transpired. But as our investigation goes on, that will become more evident, and more elements to a crime may turn themselves up. This and all of these shootings that we have, there are dual investigations. The sheriff's office conducts its own investigation into the use of the deadly force, and our state attorney's office does the same thing as well. Once those investigations are concluded into the use of deadly force, we do an administrative review into that, where the officer is obviously responsible for every time he pulled that trigger and everywhere one of those bullets went. And that's where we stand now. Again, this is still ongoing. Whether robbery charges will be brought up against Mr. Coleman for his involvement in what appears to be, at least on the surface, a setup robbery that he did of the two. Whether they're going to be facing charges for the marijuana sale, all that's still fluid, and we're still working our way through that. But based on all that, I can answer some questions.
What type of gun was found?
What you see here is the firearm that was found, that was in the ditch. That's the condition that we found it. I can get the make and model of that through the PIO to you. That way you'll have an accurate description of what that gun is.
And this was the gun that the suspect had?
This is the gun that the suspect had.
The events that transpired, there was a drug deal between two other parties.
Correct.
And this person, the suspect, Chris, came up in a car and just started shooting at these two other parties?
Well, it seems like from what we gather from the two that had the marijuana to sell, they were meeting with Coleman to sell it. At the same time, we believe that Coleman possibly had some ulterior motives and set them up to this. And again, this is this isn't Tupperware they're selling, and they're meeting with people that don't have the best intentions, surprisingly enough, when they want to buy and sell marijuana, and they bring guns to do these things, and they don't mind using those guns when they take them. Again, that ain't the Tupperware party that they're at, and this is what can happen, unfortunately, in the neighborhoods of the city where we live, and that's just not acceptable.
So just for clarification, the car that pulled up after the two of them going back, that car is connected to Coleman.
That's what we're believing, because that was the black car that came up. So somewhere Coleman or his associates who are still outstanding occupied that black car, and whatever transpired after that in that short minutes.
So there's other people that you all.
Yeah, there was two vehicles that Coleman came up in one car, and then the black car came up. Well, then Coleman got out of the black car at some point in time after this, because we got the call at 12:09, and it was about 12:20 when all this shooting occurred. So whatever happened, they met up and split up, and Coleman came out of the black car. So I know it's a bit confusing, but again.
You said the officer shot from two separate locations in the backyard?
Yes.
Did he not hit the suspect till the second time he fired?
I don't know. And again, based on our limited information that we have from Officer Heiss, not sure. I know from the evidence that we gathered in the backyard, there's two sets of shell casings that we recovered, and information from the recruit who came into the backyard at the last series of shots. So.
Okay. And what is the status of the recruit? Is he just reassigned to someone else?
His training will continue because Officer Heiss placed on administrative leave, and he did so because he was the one who actually deployed the deadly force. The recruit will move into another training officer and continue his training.
Just for as of the original call out for the original shooting, non-life-threatening injuries, I'm assuming?
Yeah, they both were treated and released at local hospital. They had one of them was shot in the back and the other one was shot in the arm. Both of them were, luckily enough, superficial injuries. If you want to call a gunshot wound to your back and arm superficial, they were treated and released.
And they're not charged with anything?
At this point in time, no. But again, this is still, we're working through a lot. I hasten to say that when you tell the police that you came to sell drugs, we don't tend to ignore that. So we're still working through that.
And how long administrative leave, does that just depend on the investigation?
It's usually just a few days, but it does depend on the investigation, and there is a fitness to duty evaluation that's done through our contract psychologist to make sure that part of what they're able to do is they're in the right mindset to return back to the street. So
This admin leave with pay, correct?
that is with pay, yes.
Any other questions?
What else?
All right.
Thank you all very much.